Joshua, it's not what you think.
That's about what my wife Beverly's last words sounded like before I grabbed her lover and dragged him outside into my Hummer. It was a pretty fun day that changed my life before and after. And now I'm ready to tell you what happened to me. Enjoy watching. My name is Joshua, and my wife Beverly and I have been married for 18 years. We have an 18-year-old daughter, Ruby, whom we raised together and provided with everything we needed. My daughter is in her first year of college. I work, and Beverly takes care of the household. It happened that we started dating when we were both 20, and after 2 months of our relationship, we found out that Beverly was pregnant. I took the news quite positively, although I didn't understand what would happen next. First thing, I proposed to Beverly, and we got married. The time was tough. Neither Beverly nor I had an education. Beverly stayed at home, managing the household. After Ruby was born, the situation got worse. I lost my job, and we were left without income. We had to take out a loan until we got back on our feet. We lived in a tiny room, literally 15 square meters, in my parents' house, and we had no idea what to do. When Ruby turned 4, my job situation improved, and we started receiving a stable income. Eventually, we moved out of my parents' place, buying a small but cozy house on the outskirts of the city. I wanted my daughter Ruby to grow up in good conditions, so I found a side job. I worked during the day at my main job and in the evening until late into the night at the second one. It was a challenging time, and I'm glad we managed to break free. We completely paid off all our debts, bought the house, and 2 years ago I bought a Hummer that we had been saving up for. We also saved money for Ruby's college education. I climbed the career ladder, although previously I thought it would be impossible without education. But thanks to working hard and showing initiative, my boss encouraged me, and I eventually reached a high position. Now my salary is enough to fully support the family. We didn't live a lavish life, but we have everything we need, and the most important thing is that my daughter Ruby feels great. I always thought I was raising my daughter correctly, but my stress increased when she brought her first boyfriend, Andrew, into our home. He was in the same college as Ruby, but on the 3rd year. From the moment I saw him in my house, I didn't like him. I can't explain this feeling, but I felt my daughter deserved better. I often said to myself,
"What did she see in him?"
Before Ruby introduced us to her boyfriend, they had been secretly dating for 3 months. Ruby told Beverly that she was afraid of my reaction, that I would get mad at her, and that's exactly what happened. I never showed my hatred for Andrew. On the contrary, I was friendly and sociable. I always asked him questions and supported him during conversations, but I felt that Andrew was somehow reaching out to someone. However, whenever he crossed the threshold of our house, I went up to Ruby and talked to her. One of these conversations took place the day before that very day.
Dad, I don't even want to touch on this topic. Andrew is a normal guy.
Ruby said that as soon as I opened the door.
I'm not interested in your opinion. I see it from a different perspective.
She continued.
"I'm not scolding you, I just can't understand what you see in him. He has 0 prospects, he doesn't even work, and I heard he studies terribly, although it's essentially his only way to a normal life,"
I said.
Tell me, Dad, did you look for explanations to love my mom?
Ruby retorted.
"No, but your mom believed in me and I was confident. I had fire in my eyes, but unfortunately I don't see that fire in Andrew,"
I replied.
That's because Mom got pregnant with me, and you already needed to do something. You don't even have an education, and you're talking about Andrew. We've been together for only 4 months. I'm not telling you that I want to spend my whole life with him. Maybe I'll break up with him in a couple of days, but now everything about him suits me,"
she said.
"But Ruby..."
Before I could finish, Ruby interrupted me, saying,
Enough, Dad. Close the topic. I'm tired of it.
"Can I ask one last question?"
I asked.
Okay, but I have the right not to answer if I don't like it.
Ruby replied.
"Fine. Has it happened between you and Andrew?"
I asked.
Yes, and not just once. I'm 18 years old, so I decide what to do with my body,"
Ruby declared, and I paled. I didn't expect such a sharp answer.
"And how long ago did this happen? Why didn't you tell us?"
This is already the second question. We agreed on one question, and besides, Mom knows everything, so that's it, Dad. Good night. I need to prepare for exams.
she said, and I wished her a good night, leaving extremely dissatisfied. I decided to find out what was going on and went straight to Beverly. When I entered our bedroom, I saw that Beverly was lying on the bed in her underwear and reading a book. Without revealing my intentions, I shared the news.
Honey, do you know what I just found out?
What's wrong, dear?
She asked playfully.
Our daughter had an intimate relationship with a guy, James. I think that's his name.
What guy? His name is Andrew. Yes, I know. Ruby told me, but strongly asked you not to mention it. But you see, she confessed everything herself,
My wife said. In that moment, I forgot what I wanted to say. Beverly's reaction angered me. Why was she defending Andrew? In the end, we argued and silently went to sleep, turning away from each other. I couldn't understand why my wife disagreed with me and saw Andrew as a good person. She started defending him when Andrew began staying overnight at our place frequently. Unfortunately, Ruby started inviting him not just for the evening or the day. She began leaving him overnight, and they slept together in Ruby's room. I assumed Beverly was defending Andrew and allowing him to stay overnight with us because she pitied him. The thing is, Andrew grew up in a foster family and still resides there. The conditions there, let's say, are not very favorable. Of course, I felt sorry for Andrew for what happened in his life, losing his parents at a young age, but I still didn't like him. Once I came home late, around 11 p.m., and on the doorstep I saw Andrew's sneakers, who shouldn't have been there at that time. I specifically set conditions that there should be no strangers in the house when I come home from work, meaning by 8 p.m., Andrew should have either left or be getting ready to leave. It turned out Beverly let Andrew stay without asking for my permission. After that moment, we almost quarreled every day, all because of Andrew. After an unsuccessful conversation with my daughter and Beverly, I couldn't sleep for a long time. It seemed like my family was turning away from me, letting a stranger into the house, doing everything for him, not for me. Whenever I came home, there was always something to eat. And now, on the days when Andrew stayed overnight, I come home, and I have to finish leftovers because Andrew eats a lot and consumes my food. All these little moments were getting on my nerves. A month passed since I found out that my daughter was dating Andrew, and he was already living in my house, eating my food, and seducing my daughter. The next day, after the argument with Beverly and the dispute with Ruby, I went to work in a depressed state. Ruby was going to an exam, and Beverly was taking care of household matters. I was driving and thinking,
If I kick this brat out of my house now, my wife and daughter won't forgive me. What should I do then?
I never found an answer to my question, but the workday started productively. I completed all the morning tasks and prepared for a meeting where I had to present a new project.
Joshua, you haven't forgotten that we have a meeting in an hour and a half, have you? Did you prepare everything? Didn't forget anything?
Richard, my boss, said.
No, sir, I'm fully prepared.
I replied, and suddenly remembered that I left all the documents at home. How could I forget them? Flashed in my mind, and in panic I rushed to my assistant, telling her I needed to leave for about 30 minutes and asked her to cover for me.
Okay, Mr. Joshua, I'll take care of it,
she replied. At the speed of light, I ran to my car and headed home. On the way home, I tried calling Beverly to ask her to retrieve the documents from the living room and quickly bring them to me, but she didn't answer the phone. Then I decided to call Ruby, hoping she was already at home.
Dad, are you out of your mind? I'm still waiting for my turn, and you're calling and distracting me. I told you I would call as soon as I finished the exam,
she said and hung up. I was driving fast and I had to exceed the speed limit. I shouldn't mess up this meeting, I thought to myself, because if they approve my project, it means an immediate bonus, a salary increase, and a chance to elevate my position. Arriving home, I glanced at the clock. It was 1:15 p.m. Darn it, I only drove for 30 minutes to get home. And the meeting was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. It meant I needed to quickly enter the house and head back. The front door turned out to be locked, which surprised me, as it's usually open during the day, and I never carried keys not to lose them. I decided to try the back entrance, but it was also closed. Frustrated, I approached the kitchen window and heard loud music playing on the second floor. Apparently, Beverly was cleaning and listening to music. I decided to enter the house through the window, but the problem was that it was partially open. To get inside, I had to reach across the street to the handle. Luckily, my stretch did not fail me, and I managed to shift it and fully climb inside. The first thing that caught my eye was the mess. The house was in the same state as it was in the morning when I left for work. Loud music was playing on the second floor, so I decided to go upstairs. However, I suddenly noticed Beverly's phone lying on the nightstand. It had 3 missed calls from me, and below I saw messages from Andrew, but I couldn't read them because the phone was locked. An unpleasant feeling overwhelmed me. Why does this guy have my wife's contacts, or is this normal now? I thought, and went to the second floor. Due to the loud music, I couldn't discern things at first, but as I ascended, I heard moans. When I reached the corridor on the second floor, I distinctly heard the moans of my wife and slapping sounds. The door to our bedroom was partially open, and music mixed with moans and slaps emanated from there. I approached the door carefully, and the first thing I saw was Beverly's lace panties, which she usually wore on our anniversary. I moved closer, and the scene became clearer. I leaned cautiously into the doorway to see what was happening on the bed. I saw my wife in a doggy-style position, and behind her stood a young guy. From behind, I couldn't immediately recognize him as Andrew. They didn't notice me because their backs were turned. The emotions at that moment were indescribable. I took out my phone and recorded a 30-second video, just in case. Then I stealthily approached from behind. When I was as close as possible, I grabbed the guy by the hair and threw him off the bed with all my strength. When he fell to the floor, I finally realized it was Andrew. He lay there for a few seconds, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Quickly, I took out my phone and photographed his face. Meanwhile, Beverly had already seen me. I grabbed Andrew by the hair and dragged him across the floor. At that moment, Beverly screamed,
Joshua, it's not what you think.
As I dragged the guy downstairs, the music abruptly stopped. Beverly ran out of the room and shouted,
Andrew is not guilty. Andrew is not guilty. It's all me. Leave him alone.
But I ignored her, and Andrew couldn't resist because what could a guy do against someone weighing 110 kilograms? I smashed the front door. Beverly in a robe rushed outside, trying to stop me as I dragged Andrew naked on the ground. However, I just bypassed her and headed to the car. When she tried to block my path to the car, I said,
Leave or he'll really get hurt right here.
She ran away. I opened my Hummer, threw Andrew into the back seat and told him,
Don't move, do you understand?
Andrew nodded, indicating he understood. Once I closed the door, I noticed my neighbor watering the lawn. His face was a sight to behold. He wasn't just surprised. He was in shock.
Anthony, don't worry. It's an educational process. Everything will be fine with the lad.
I shouted to my neighbor and was about to get into the car when my wife came out of the house and started yelling at me.
Joshua, if you leave now, I'll call the police for kidnapping Andrew.
I realized that my wife had lost her fear, so I asked Andrew,
Dude, did I kidnap you?
No.
There you go. Now shout the same to my wife, whom you were fooling around with in my bedroom today.
I told him and he shouted, saying that everything was fine, and we left. After 5 minutes on the road, Beverly started calling me, and then my boss called. I had already forgotten about work, so I simply turned off the notifications. Another 5 minutes later, Andrew decided to ask me,
Are you going to kill me?
Why? I don't want to go to jail. I came up with something more interesting.
I said. After 40 minutes, we arrived at the main entrance of the college where my daughter Ruby had exams today, and she was supposed to finish soon.
Get out,
I told Andrew. Andrew wanted to say something, but I said more convincingly,
Get out immediately. Step out and stand still. If you move anywhere, it will get worse. Understood?
Andrew nodded and carefully opened the door, stepping out onto the street. I quickly moved to the side and began to observe from a distance. Andrew stood naked, covering his lower body with his hands, trembling with fear. In my thoughts, I was like, he's a hero in seducing my wife. He could have just run away or not gotten out of the car. He's a coward and weak. After all, who am I to make him do anything? But it amused me that he followed my instructions. And after 3 minutes, a crowd of students gathered around him, wondering what was happening and what he was doing there. Some guys started laughing at him and throwing paper scraps. Someone took pictures, and others just stood and watched from the sidelines like me. Suddenly, Ruby came out of the main entrance, no smile on her face. Most likely, she first called Beverly, and Beverly told her that her supposedly tyrant father had kidnapped her boyfriend. The funniest thing was that it turned out to be true. Beverly really told Ruby and portrayed me as a monster. I quickly went to Ruby to prevent her from approaching Andrew. At that moment, Andrew started shouting at Ruby and calling her. I began to approach Ruby, but she started moving away from me and went in the completely opposite direction. At that moment, Andrew wanted to run towards Ruby, but some guy stopped him and knocked him to the ground. Someone called the police on Andrew because he dared to appear in such a state near an educational institution. I went after Ruby, shouting to her that I would explain everything, but she accelerated her pace and I had to run after her. In the end, she also started running, calling for help. I realized it was pointless. Returning to the car, I saw a police car where they were putting Andrew. I smirked. In the car, I decided to turn on notifications and saw a message from Ruby. Never approach me again. More than 6 missed calls from Beverly and 23 missed calls from my boss. This is bad. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I went to a bar and stayed there until morning. I started with beer and ended up with whiskey. I met some guys in the bar to whom I told my story. They didn't believe me, but I showed them the photos, and they were shocked. In the morning, I didn't get behind the wheel. I called a taxi and went to the hostel. There, I spent 2 days, bought a pen and a notebook, and thought about what to do next. I wrote to my boss, briefly explaining the situation. He seemed to understand me and told me to get in touch once everything was settled, so I turned off my phone. On the second day, I finally developed a plan, wrote down all the risks, and realized it was time to go home. My main goal was to remain on good terms with my daughter. I understood that at first she would be against me, but I hoped that over time she would understand me. After driving 500 meters, the police stopped me, and I had to go to the police station. As it turned out, Beverly had filed a statement against me, stating that I had broken into the house during the day, hit her first, and then kidnapped Joshua, forcing him to stand naked near the college under threat. It was also stated that Beverly had been suffering from domestic violence on my part for 3 years. But what surprised me the most was a statement from Ruby, who indicated the same thing. At first, I was bewildered. I was accused of domestic violence. I initially demanded my lawyer. On the same day, I wrote everything as it really happened, attaching evidence, video footage, and photos. I stated that Andrew voluntarily went with me, and my neighbor, who was watering his lawn at that moment, confirmed it. He affirmed that Andrew didn't resist and heard no threats. My neighbor also mentioned that I was calm, and he had never seen anything suspicious. I also specified that Andrew walked out on the street near the college on his own. I didn't pull him out forcibly. Meanwhile, Andrew was arrested, and my statement was accepted. Later, Beverly and Ruby arrived with a lawyer. They were summoned because their testimonies were completely different, and they had no evidence. Ruby didn't even look at me, while Beverly threw a disdainful glance my way. I felt hurt by how my wife treated me. The lawyer told me that Ruby didn't know about any connection between Beverly and Andrew, but they would find out during the interrogations. My lawyer's prediction turned out to be accurate when Ruby came out into the hallway, hugged me tightly, and began apologizing. She explained that her mom had told her a completely different version of the story, and out of anger, Ruby agreed to give false testimony to punish me. However, her opinion quickly changed when they showed her the photos. I didn't hold any grudges against Ruby. I was just glad she believed me. A couple of months later, we officially divorced in court, sold the house, and divided the amount between us. Beverly had to pay me a substantial sum for false accusations. Andrew was released, but he was expelled from college, and he had to leave because everyone mocked him when the truth came out. My boss was understanding and rescheduled the hearings. During this time, I made amendments and improvements to my work, presented it, and it was approved. I received a bonus and double salary, along with a good raise. I bought a smaller house and had to settle for a more modest car. Ruby has decided to stay and live with me, at least until she graduates from college. Beverly moved in with her parents and had to find a job to compensate me. Ruby doesn't want to talk to Beverly, and I totally understand her. Overall, life has settled down. I just want every listener to understand that there can be situations in life that you never anticipate, and you need to be ready to make decisions. Do I regret what happened? For a while, yes, but now I understand that it's an excellent reason to start afresh. I devote more time to myself, joined a gym, and most importantly, I pay more attention to my daughter. I can confidently say that everything is good with me, and I hope my story will be useful to you, and you will take away something important for yourself. I do not wish this to anyone, so good luck to everyone. Thank you for listening to my story, and thanks to the Aurora Stories channel.
It was the story of our subscriber who sent it to us by email, and we had the idea to create a separate forum where our viewers can share their stories. It doesn't matter if something happened to you or your friend, buddy, work colleague. It doesn't matter. You can share your story, and we will insert them at the end of the video every time. How do you like this idea? Write your opinion in the comments. If we get enough feedback from you, we will implement this idea. Now back to the story. Do you think the main character made the right decision that he decided to act immediately, rather than wait a couple of months to collect evidence? Why did the wife of the main character decide to sleep with her daughter's boyfriend, and was it just once? Write your opinion in the comments, and we will end there. Subscribe to our channel, like it, and don't forget to smile more. Good luck.